It is time to finally make some official predictions for the Ducks 24-25 season on this edition of Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
You're Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone. How's it going? Welcome to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jason Hernandez. I've been covering hockey for well over a decade, and today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase from Gametime. So once again, I'm Jason Hernandez. I've been covering hockey for well over a decade, and we're still a couple days away from the Ducks' first game of the season, whereas a few other teams have played by now. But hey, that's how the scheduling goes, I guess. All right, so this is another episode that I do every year. I already did the Meet the Ducks episode, and I do this literally every year where I give my predictions for the upcoming season. Some predictions I've made in the past have been pretty good. A couple have been exactly spot on. Others not so much, and I'll even own up that I've had some pretty horrible takes in the past, and I've tried to not have those kind of horrible takes anymore. But I do have a pretty solid list of predictions on this little notepad here, which I'm not going to show you what's written on here, but I do have a list of predictions here. And we're going to start with my first prediction, and this is kind of piggybacking on a recent podcast that I did with Emily Wilson from Sporting Tribune. So we talked at length about Łukasz Dostal, and I should point out once again that John Gibson is going to be out for a short bit as he recovers from an emergency appendectomy. He's expected to be out for another probably couple of weeks, it looks like. So Łukasz Dostal is going to get the majority of the starts to begin the season. The Ducks do begin on the road before finally coming back home and playing their first game against the Utah Hockey Club. Most of their games to start the season are on the road. So this is going to be kind of a tough stretch for the Ducks coming up. But Dostal is expected to make probably 5 of those 6 starts before the Ducks go on that East Coast road trip to the New York and Pennsylvania area. So I have this prediction. I predict that Łukasz Dostal will have 45 plus starts this coming season. Last season, Łukasz Dostal made a total of 38 starts. Okay, so he started 38 games, shared the load with John Gibson. Part of that was John Gibson was out quite a bit last season, and when the Ducks became officially eliminated from playoff contention, Dostal got the majority of the starts towards the end of the season when it became apparent that the Ducks were not going to make the playoffs, and that should have been apparent pretty early on. But with Gibby out for a few games, and he's probably not going to be like right up to speed quite yet. So if I were to make a prediction, if the Ducks have 10 games in the month of October, I predict that Dostal will start 8 of those games, 8 out of 10. And then he'll probably split the load with John Gibson for the rest of the season. So giving him that little bit of an 8 game out of 10 boost to start the season, then I will say 45 plus starts for Łukasz Dostal. And that's a prediction that I think I could make pretty confidently, because there's no way that John Gibson is going to start that many games coming off of a surgery. Not right away. If the Ducks are in a good spot in December, January, and depending on how Gibby and Dostal does, it is possible that John Gibson could get the mother load of starts towards the middle of the season. That depends on how the Ducks are doing. That depends on how Dostal is doing. So still a lot to go through there. But if it was me, if I was a betting man, 45 plus starts for this season. Another prediction that I don't know if I feel super comfortable making this because of what happened last season, but this is me being a little bit hopeful. I predict that Trevor Zegras is going to play 80 plus games this season. Of course, that means that he'll have to avoid the injury bug and avoid getting suspended or avoid some kind of shenanigans this season. That's not always a guarantee. As far as injuries, that's not always a guarantee either. Last season, Trevor Zegras missed a total of 51 games, which is quite a lot. So I'm making this prediction based on how he's looked during training camp, how he has looked during the preseason. He looks a little bit faster. He looks like he's well into 100%. He looks better than 100% right now. So if I were to make a prediction, that's one I'm going to stick with. That is also me being hopeful, very hopeful. The team is better with Trevor Zegras. Let's face it. Let's be honest here. The Anaheim Ducks are better when Trevor Zegras is out on the ice. There's no question about it. If he can play 80 plus games this season, the Ducks, you're going to see a big improvement for the Ducks this season compared to the last few years. So that is kind of a hopeful thought. Just a little bit. All right, I've got a few more predictions here, and I'm actually going to save the next three for the next segment. So what I'm going to do right now is we're going to head to the first intermission, and I will give my next three predictions. I'll give my reasoning behind those three predictions after the first intermission. Stay locked in. And now a brief word from the Gametime app. And I love using Gametime. I have used Gametime several times, especially this year and last year, where I would get baseball tickets. You can get Angels tickets for $1, but they're out of it. So why not check out the Dodgers in the postseason? They won Game 4. You can get your Game 5 Dodger tickets at Gametime right now because they have flash deals, zone deals, they have super deals. They have Gametime picks, which makes finding tickets even easier. And you get good last minute tickets at very good prices. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Ooh. Welcome back to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Once again, you're locked in with Jason Hernandez on episode number 935 of Locked On Anaheim Ducks. Thanks for those of you that have stuck around for that many episodes. Just going to put this out there right now. Mailbag episode is going to come tomorrow, so I'm guessing early Thursday, maybe late Thursday, I'll put out a tweet, send in your questions, and yeah, just let them rip. Okay, I got three more predictions for this segment. And the next one's going to have to do with a player that I'm very excited about, and that is Cutter Gauthier. Now, before I get into that prediction, I did talk about this on my my interview podcast, and I am predicting that Cutter Gauthier is going to be a Calder Trophy finalist right there with Macklin Celebrini. Now, have I made a third pick yet? No, I'm not going to commit to a third pick right now. But if I were to go with the top two, or at least 2 of 3, I feel comfortable, just based on how I've seen both of them play, I feel comfortable putting Macklin Celebrini up there. I feel comfortable putting, obviously, Cutter Gauthier there. What do you think I was going to say? Becca Seneca? He's hurt right now. But Cutter is absolutely the real deal, which leads into this prediction. Cutter Gauthier is going to score 60 plus points this season. Yes, I said that. Yes, it is extremely hopeful. Am I a little bit crazy for making that kind of prediction? Yeah, I am. Jason, do you realize what you're saying here? Do you realize that you're expecting Cutter Gauthier to average 3/4 of a point per game? Yes, I'm aware of that. I for sure am. But I saw how he acted during rookie camp. I saw how he was during the rookie face-off in El Segundo. I saw how he played during the preseason. I mean, 12 shots in one game. Are you freaking kidding me? Whew. And having that many shots on goal during the preseason second in the entire NHL, yeah, you bet your you-know-what that I'm going to predict that. Because he is not afraid to shoot the freaking puck. He's not. He's kind of fearless in that way too. So as long as he can keep up that kind of aggressive play and maybe even be more aggressive on the offensive end and just go for goals galore, then I could see him making that mark maybe easily. So that one I actually feel more comfortable on that prediction. No, I shouldn't say that. Dostal I feel comfortable with. But the Cutter Gauthier 60 plus points, I feel pretty comfortable making that kind of prediction. So I'm just going to keep it on here. And it is in ink, by the way. So Cutter Gauthier, 60 plus points. A little offshoot to that prediction. I predict that he's going to score a goal in Philadelphia when they play there later this season. Ducks fans, I sincerely hope you have that game marked off on your calendar. I certainly do. Got to wait all the way till January to see that one. January 11th to be exact. That's how long we have to wait to see that matchup. I'm sure he's going to feed off of the booze very quickly. So yeah, those are my predictions for Cutter Gauthier. Next, okay. This one I had to be very careful about because I think there's going to be quite a few Ducks players that are going to have an improved season. And I'm going to say that the player that's going to lead the team in points for the Ducks this season, Troy Terry. Yeah, that should come as no surprise to some of the loyal listeners, those everydayers. Yeah, I think Troy Terry is still the best player on the Ducks right now. He led the team in points 3 seasons ago. 2 seasons ago, he was second in points. Last season, he was second in points. So he is going to be among those guys that's going to lead or hopefully lead the team in points. Last season, he played in 6 fewer games than Frank Vatrano and had 6 fewer points. So maybe if he played every game, he could have led the team in scoring. Maybe. Who knows? How about the other season? Okay. The previous season, he scored 61 points. Trevor Zegras had 65 points in 11 fewer games. If Troy Terry plays even 6 more games in 22-23, he probably would have led the team in points that season. So that I'm okay with. So Troy Terry, once again, leading the team in points. And by the way, in parentheses I have here, barely second place, Trevor Zegras. But that's because I also predicted that Z was going to play 80 plus games this season. So if that holds up, Terry 1, Zegras 2. Third, I didn't actually write this down, but if I'm going to pick a third, Mason McTavish. No, I take that back. Cutter Gauthier third, Mason McTavish fourth. Okay, there you go. Next prediction. This prediction I make every year. Breakout player. Who do I think is going to be the breakout player for the Ducks this season? And honestly, okay, this one was very tough because I think there's a number of candidates that could be the breakout player for the Ducks this season. And gosh, I like scratched out a couple of names. I went back and forth on this and I finally settled on Jackson Lacombe, who could be the breakout player for the Ducks this season. We saw him on the Power Play 1 on the last preseason game. We know he's a good quarterbacking defenseman on the power play. We've seen it. And he got a lot of playing time during the preseason. There was a couple of games where he was, I think, leading all defensemen in time on ice. He is still young, by the way, so he can take it. But he's gaining experience. He's gaining confidence, folks. He's gaining a lot of confidence. He looks like kind of a new player this year compared to last year. It looks like he may have bulked up a little bit too. He looks like he's in better shape. So that combined with confidence, that's why I'm going to say that Jackson Lacombe is going to be my breakout player this coming season for the Anaheim Ducks. But I'm just going to be honest here. That one was very, very tough. I had a few players in mind. Mintyukov was up there. I had pretty much every defenseman could have fit that category. Well, not every defenseman. Every young defenseman could have fit that category. All right, we're going to head into the second intermission. But before we do, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Who do you think is going to be the breakout player for the Ducks this season? Let me know in the comments. Let me know via email or text. Let me know who's your breakout player for the Anaheim Ducks this coming season. All right, got my final predictions here. We'll get to those on the other side. And now a brief word from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And hey fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. And when you get a hunch or a feeling in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, the official sports betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. And please, folks, please gamble responsibly. Welcome back to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Once again, you are locked in with Jason Hernandez as I'm giving my predictions for this coming season. Just to kind of go back from the previous segment. So I briefly talked about Jackson Lacombe, and I actually do have a number. So my prediction is Jackson Lacombe will get at least 35 points this season. I'm inclined to think he might even get 40. I would consider that a breakout season because he is a defenseman. Defenseman 40 points. I would take that any day of the week. All right, so I got 3 more predictions, and then we are going to wrap up. So this prediction is more of actually the rest of these are team predictions. And the first one that I put is the Ducks are going to score at least 250 goals this season. Last year, they scored 203. That was good enough for 30th place in the National Hockey League. 250 would still be below league average. League average last season was about 253. So 250 would still be below average, but that would be about a 47 to 50 goal improvement. They've got the weapons. They finally have players that are willing to put the puck on the net more often. So that's my prediction, 250 goals this coming season, which means they would average just over 3 goals a game. 3 goals a game would be 246. So I predict that they will average at least 3 goals a game. As far as goals allowed, I'm not going to make any predictions there. I know last season they allowed 293. They allowed a lot of goals. They're probably still going to allow a lot of goals, so I don't have the heart to make a prediction on that one as to not ruffle any feathers. But I like that figure. Above 3 a game, I'm going to stick with that. Next one has to do with special teams. I've already mentioned that Jackson Lacombe is going to be on the power play, and he's improved quite a lot just over the course of a year. You've got other guys that can lead a power play as far as defenseman's concerned, or you could do what the Ducks did sometimes last season, mix and match, have 2 defensemen on the power play, although that didn't work a whole lot, did it? Not so much. So this is kind of a weird prediction. This is a very, very optimistic prediction. The Anaheim Ducks are going to be top 10 in the league in power play percentage. That's a lofty one. Last season, the Anaheim Ducks finished 25th in the league with a 17.9% clip on the power play. The top 10 last year, Tampa Bay 28.6, Carolina 26.9, New York 26.4, Edmonton 26.3, Colorado 24.5, Dallas 24.2, number 7 Toronto 24%, then Florida 23.5%, then Detroit 23.1%, rounding out the top 10, Minnesota 22.7%. This is an extremely optimistic prediction. The Ducks last season were 17.9%. Am I predicting that they're going to improve 5 percentage points this season? Yes. Yes, I am. They got a clip of almost 30% power play on those 6 preseason games. Now, granted, those were against some lesser teams, and yes, it's a small sample size, but just looking at how those units looked the last 3 games in particular, The movement is way better. The shot selection is way better. There's something more fluid about their power play this season than every single game, including preseason last year. If that is an indicator of what the Ducks are going to do on the power play this season, then I've got very high hopes for their power play, and that's why I'm predicting they're going to be top 10 in power play this coming season. All right, one final prediction before we wrap up. I know I said that the Ducks were going to have a certain amount of points in previous podcasts. I said a 20-point improvement. I don't know if I necessarily want to stick with that, but I'm going to come close. I'm predicting, just to give myself a little bit of leeway, I'm predicting that the Anaheim Ducks are going to get 77 standings points next season. That'd be good enough for 6th place in the division. That would still be an 18-point improvement. It wouldn't be good enough to make the playoffs. On average, wildcard teams make it to playoffs anywhere from 88 to 92 points. So the Ducks would still be short of that threshold. But an 18-point improvement is still solid for a team that is up and coming, for a young team. And if they can have any sense of, okay, we're still in it in late March, we might even still be in the hunt in April. So 77 is nothing to sneeze at. Yes, it still would mean that the Ducks would have a lesser chance of getting a lottery pick, but you finally want to move that needle in the right direction. And I think this year is absolutely it. So here's what I'm going to say. 77 is good. I am going to say at least. I realize that I've made these kind of predictions in the past a little bit more optimistic. One year, the personnel just wasn't there. Another year, actually, the year that the personnel wasn't there, I think I predicted like 70 points, and they fell below that too. Then there was another year I said, okay, they're going to get 80-something, and then the injury bug happened. I'm going to be more realistic about this, and I'll explain why. The Ducks' health is still going to be a bit of a concern, mostly because of what happened last season. John Gibson missing time is going to be concerning. Beckett Seneca not being around is going to be concerning, even though I don't think the Ducks need him right away. It would still be nice to have someone of that caliber on your team at least the latter part of this season, if not next season. So that's part of it. These are still all young players too. They've still got a bit of growing up to do. I mean, half of the roster is 25 and below right now. So they've still got some growing pains to go through, and they are going to go through growing pains, fans. They are. But that doesn't mean I can't be optimistic. That doesn't mean that they cannot at least go in the right direction, because that's a part of a rebuild. That's part of every rebuild. You have to go through these. So I'm going to stick with 77 points on this one, and hopefully you all agree. Is that too high of a prediction? Too low? Let me know. All right, that's going to do it for this podcast, the official predictions podcast. Next time we meet, we're going to talk about the San Diego Gulls. So it'll kind of be the return of Gulls Thursday, because the Gulls roster is coming out. So now we're going to meet the San Diego Gulls roster this season, and there's a couple of surprises there, a couple of big surprises. In the meantime, thank you so much for making this your first listen. Go ahead and make Locked On NHL your second listen of the day. Don't forget, this podcast is free and available across all platforms, including Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast. We are ad-free on Amazon. We are also on YouTube, so hit that subscribe button down there. You could follow me on Twitter X at StimpyJD. The show's Twitter X is at LO_Ducks. You could email me at lockedonanaheimducks@gmail.com. The mailbag is open, so go ahead and drop me your questions. I will answer them later this week into the weekend. Once again, thank you all so much for your very continued support. It is very much appreciated, folks. For Locked On Anaheim Ducks, I'm Jason Hernandez saying have a great rest of the day. Please remember to be safe out there. Please be kind to one another. And Ducks fly together.